me tell you what is actually happening. The respected voices in this hobby, the ones with the long careers and the careful analyses and the measured tones, they are sitting in front of their cameras right now telling you that African cichlids are in decline, that the hobby has shrunk, that people moved on to planted tanks and nanofish and easier things, and they are not wrong about the numbers. They are wrong about what the numbers mean. The hobby did not decline, it got filtered. The people who wanted a screensaver with fins went and found one. The people who wanted something that actually challenges them, something that pushes back, something that holds up a mirror and shows you exactly what kind of keeper you are on your worst maintenance week, those people are still here, fewer of them. But they were always the ones who mattered. African cichlids did not lose their audience, they lost their tourists. And before we go any further, there are two things this video is going to get to that most channels in this hobby never touch honestly. The first is what actually happened to the genetics of these fish between the 80s and today. The fish you are buying right now may not be the fish you think you are buying. The second is what Tanganyika has been quietly trying to tell us for 40 years, while everyone was too busy screaming about Malawi colors to listen. Those things are coming, but you need everything else first for them to land properly. Drop a comment right now. Have you been in this hobby the whole time, or did you leave and come back? I want to know, because those are two completely different stories. Let us start with something nobody in this hobby wants to say out loud because it sounds arrogant and elitist, and maybe it is both of those things, and also completely true. African cichlid keeping is not for everyone. It never was. It just took a while for the hobby to figure that out. In the 80s and 90s, these fish were everywhere. Colorful, cheap, available, no YouTube channels explaining compatibility, no detailed guides on what happens when you put an Auratus male in a 100-liter tank with 5 other fish and expect everyone to get along. Books, local clubs, word of mouth, and a lot of optimism. Here is a scenario that played out in tanks everywhere throughout the 80s. Someone walks into a store, sees an Auratus, thinks the yellow and black is gorgeous, buys 3, drops them into a 100-liter tank with some gravel and a plastic castle, goes to bed feeling like they nailed it. 3 weeks later, one Auratus has decided it owns the entire operation. The other 2 are hiding in corners not eating. 6 weeks later, there is one Auratus in the tank and a keeper with no idea what happened. That was not bad luck. That was the predictable result of keeping one of the most territorially aggressive species in freshwater in a tank that was too small, with the wrong numbers, with no understanding of the social dynamics involved. The Auratus did exactly what Auratus do. The keeper just had absolutely no idea what Auratus do. Information poverty in practice. A lot of dead fish. A lot of disillusioned keepers who left and told their friends. Their friends went to planted tanks instead, and the hobby shrank. This is the great filter, and it worked exactly as filters are supposed to work. What remained after the filter ran is a community of keepers who know what they signed up for, who understand that a mixed tank is a system to be managed, not a display to be arranged. Smaller, but better. More knowledgeable, more committed, keeping fish more correctly than the bloated version of the hobby that existed before the filter ran. The hobby did not shrink, it clarified. Let us talk about planted tanks. I will say something that sounds controversial and is actually just accurate. Planted tanks are beautiful, genuinely. The craft involved in a well-executed aquascape is real. The chemistry knowledge required to maintain a high-tech planted setup is not trivial. But here is what the planted tank highlight reels will not show you. They will not show you the CO2 system that decided to stop working at 2 in the morning while your fish gasped at the surface of your carefully curated nature aquarium. They will not show you the plant that melted for no reason anyone on the forum could fully explain. They will not show you the algae crisis that turned a peaceful Sunday into a chemistry emergency. Planted tank keepers are essentially interior decorators working with tweezers, nervously placing moss, praying their expensive equipment does not assassinate their fish overnight. We do not do interior design here. We build infrastructure for animals that have aggressive opinions about architecture. You spend 4 hours on a Sunday creating what feels like a perfect rockscape. By Tuesday morning, a dominant Mbuna, who apparently holds an advanced degree in civil engineering, has relocated 3 kilograms of sand to the completely opposite side of the tank, because that is where it belongs now, according to the Mbuna. By Wednesday, your aesthetic layout is an active archaeological dig site. And the brutal truth is, the Mbuna probably arranged it better than you did. The distinction that actually matters is this. In a planted tank, the fish are accessories to the design. They are chosen for what they will not do. They exist to not disrupt. In a cichlid tank, the design is infrastructure for the fish. Everything exists in service of animals that will rearrange it the moment it stops serving their purposes. One type of keeper is optimizing for how the tank looks. The other is optimizing for what the fish actually are. Both are valid. The problem was never that planted tanks exist. The problem was people ending up in the wrong category because nobody explained the difference before they bought the fish. The number one reason people cite for leaving this hobby is aggression. Their fish fought constantly. Weaker fish got destroyed. The tank never stabilized. Translation: I built the wrong tank and called it the fish's fault. A 100-liter tank with 6 Mbunas of random species and 1 plastic cave is not a cichlid setup. It is a death camp with aeration. Putting fish with incompatible evolutionary histories into a space with nowhere to establish territory and then being surprised by the results is not a beginner mistake that deserves sympathy. This is not a United Nations peace summit. These fish do not have a dialogue setting, they have a territory setting, and that is the only setting they ship with. I had a tank years ago where I thought I was doing everything right. Compatible species on paper, enough fish, good filtration. One male was still destroying everything. I spent 3 weeks adjusting the rockwork, changing the feeding schedule, testing the water. Everything came back fine. What I had not figured out was that specific fish was a warlord that was never going to coexist in that size tank with those particular individuals, regardless of what I changed around it. Sometimes the answer is not the setup. Sometimes the answer is that one fish. You learn that by watching, not by testing. The fish are almost never too aggressive, the setup is wrong, or the fish combination is wrong, or there is one individual that needs to come out. These are solvable problems, but they require understanding the system rather than blaming the animals running it. Here is the unglamorous part that nobody puts in the manifesto, but everyone who has been in this hobby long enough knows is actually the whole game. Maintenance, not the exciting kind. The weekly, get the bucket out whether you feel like it or not. Kind, African cichlid tanks do not forgive, neglect the way a community tank of sleepy neon tetras might. When nitrates rise, your tank does not just get dirty, the fish notice and their neurology shifts. There is a reason experienced keepers describe their tank before a water change as tense and the same tank after a water change as noticeably calmer. This is not imagination. It is chemistry affecting behavior. The Mbuna that normally chases a rival for 3 seconds is now running a 30-second hunt. The boundary that was stable is being tested again. The whole system runs hotter. I have skipped water changes. Everyone reading this has skipped water changes. You tell yourself the water looks clean. That is the trap. The water looks clean long after the water has stopped being appropriate for the fish living in it. The bucket is the medicine. You stand there on a Sunday afternoon siphoning water, occasionally inhaling something you probably should not have, doing the work. If you do not pick up the bucket, your fish will organize their own fight club and you will pay for the damage. The ritual of weekly maintenance is what separates tanks that thrive from tanks that perpetually struggle with no obvious reason. A keeper of average knowledge who does the maintenance every single week will have better fish than a keeper of exceptional knowledge who treats maintenance as optional. Consistency beats expertise in this hobby every time. The Instagram tank. Looking versus watching. The complaint that cichlid tanks are boring, static, the same rocks, the same fish. This usually happens because people arrived expecting an Instagram reel and got a real system instead. You have seen that perfect photograph. Crystal clear water, a peacock at maximum color under a specific lighting angle that only exists between 10:57 and 11:03 in the morning. What the frame does not show is the 3 months of parameter instability before the tank settled, the 2 fish that had to be removed because they were being systematically dismantled, or the water change that happened 30 minutes before the photo was taken. Social media shows you the highlight reel. The hobby is everything that happens between those moments, and the people who stay are the ones who find the between the moments as interesting as the moments themselves. Here is how to actually watch a cichlid tank instead of just looking at it. Watch the dominant male first. Where is he relative to yesterday? Is he displaying more or less? If more, something shifted in the hierarchy and he is reinforcing position. If less, either things are very stable or he is managing something internally that has not become visible yet. Watch the boundaries. Every cichlid tank has fish whose territories share an edge. A boundary that stays at the same point day after day is a stable hierarchy. A boundary that keeps moving in one direction is a hierarchy in transition. That is not static. That is live geopolitics. Watch the fish that is not where it normally is. A fish that has shifted its resting position, that is spending time in an area it normally avoided, is telling you something. Your job is to figure out what. This is not a screensaver. This is a live documentary about power and pressure and social intelligence, running continuously, never the same episode twice. If you find it boring, the problem is not the tank. The 75-gallon barrier, the economics, the space requirement, the real cost of infrastructure before a single fish goes in. 75-gallon minimum for a meaningful Mbuna setup. 125 where a mixed tank actually works. The tank, the stand, the oversized filtration, the substrate, the rock work. Real money before a fish arrives. I am not going to apologize for it. The barrier is the entry fee for the league. It is there because the fish require it. A cichlid colony in insufficient space is not a cichlid colony kept cheaply. It is a demonstration of how many ways an inadequate environment can break the animals living in it. What the barrier actually does is select for commitment before the fish arrive. People who have invested seriously in the infrastructure pay attention differently. They research before they buy. They maintain the water because they have seen what the setup costs, and they are not interested in watching that investment decline because they skipped a water change. If you do not have the space right now, you are a spectator in this league, not a player. That is temporary for most people. When you make the jump, you will arrive better prepared than the generation that stumbled into a 75-gallon in 1987 with no information and a bag of mixed Mbunas and nothing but optimism to guide them. The ghost of the 80s and the genetics problem. There is a version of African cichlid nostalgia I have limited patience for. The idea that things were better in the 80s when these fish were at their commercial peak. The 80s were not the golden age of cichlid keeping. They were the golden age of cichlid selling. Most of those tanks were disasters. People buying Auratus because the colors were striking without knowing what an Auratus male does in a small tank. People dropping mixed Mbunas into 100 liters and calling it an African tank. People feeding whatever pellets were cheapest and wondering why fish kept dying around the 2-year mark. Now here is what I told you was coming, because something happened between then and now that goes beyond keepers getting better. Something happened to the fish themselves. The wild-caught fish of the 80s, the ones that came directly from Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika, were genetically what they were supposed to be. Every behavioral pattern encoded correctly, every immune system at full capacity, every color potential fully realized under the right conditions. The farm-bred fish that dominate the market today are not those fish. They are a commercially optimized approximation of those fish, selected for color that photographs well, selected for growth rate that makes economic sense, not selected for genetic integrity, not selected for behavioral authenticity, not selected for the immune system resilience that a wild fish carries from millions of years of actual selection pressure. When you keep a genuinely wild-caught frontosa next to a farm-bred specimen of the same species, the difference is not subtle. The behavioral depth, the color expression, the presence of the animal, these things are not identical. The wild fish carries something the farm-bred version does not. You cannot replicate it. You can only decide whether the difference matters to you and spend accordingly. When you buy a $10 cichlid, you are not buying a fish. You are buying an approximation, and approximations perform approximately. The frontosa policy. Frontosa is the Vito Corleone of the cichlid world. It does not chase. It does not display constantly. It moves through the tank at its own pace, occupying space the way someone occupies space when they have never once had to argue about whether they belong there. Other fish give it room, not because it demanded the room, because its presence implies that demanding would be unnecessary. One look from the frontosa, and everyone in the tank suddenly remembers they had something to do elsewhere. The fish that is chasing everything in your tank is not the most powerful fish in your tank. It is the most insecure one. Real authority does not need to chase. It simply exists at a level that makes chasing unnecessary. Frontosa is not a beginner fish. It grows large slowly. A frontosa at 2 years is nowhere near what a frontosa at 5 years becomes. The hump that barely exists at 18 months is unmistakable at 4 years. You cannot rush it. You cannot replicate it with a younger fish. You simply have to be there for the process, which is the whole point of this hobby if you have been paying attention. The Mbuna as philosophy. This fish evolved in one of the most resource-limited environments in freshwater. The rocky shoreline of Lake Malawi is not abundant. The algae they feed on grows slowly. The territories that provide food and breeding access are finite and contested constantly. 2 million years of this produces a specific animal, an animal whose nervous system cannot register safety the way ours does, an animal wired to treat any relaxation as a potential loss, an animal that tests boundaries not because it is aggressive in a pathological sense, but because in its world, the boundary that is not tested is the boundary that gets taken. Now you take that animal and put it in a glass box with food appearing twice a day. The behavioral programming does not update. The Mbuna cannot know the food is guaranteed. Its entire experience of the world was built for a place where nothing is guaranteed and relaxation costs something real. You can literally see this. Watch a dominant male checking a cave he already completely controls in a tank where no other fish is even challenging him. The cave is his. The hierarchy is settled. There is no threat, and he is still at the entrance, displaying, patrolling, checking. Because the program says check. The program has always said check. The program does not know that today, for the first time in 2 million years, nothing is actually coming. And here is where keepers kill their fish with misplaced kindness. The Mbuna is programmed to eat everything available Because in the wild, available means now, because tomorrow it might not be there. You drop protein pellets into the tank. The Mbuna eats all of them, would eat more if more were available, has been running this program for 2 million years, because in 2 million years, this strategy kept it alive. In your tank, this strategy gives it Malawi bloat. The digestive system designed for continuous small quantities of algae gets loaded with concentrated protein it was never built to process. The gut bacteria proliferate, internal pressure builds. The fish that was eating enthusiastically last week is at the surface this week, and you cannot figure out what changed. What changed is that you gave a scarcity machine an unlimited supply of the wrong fuel. The system was built for the struggle. Give it too much of the wrong abundance and it breaks from the inside. Sometimes giving a fish everything it wants is the fastest way to destroy it. The personality myth. These fish have agendas. When your peacock comes to the glass as you approach, it is not expressing affection. It has learned that you are the large presence that precedes a resource event. It coded you as the delivery system approximately 3 days after you brought it home. I know that sounds cold, but here is the thing. The fact that your cichlid's response to you is based on rational assessment rather than emotional attachment does not make it less real. It makes it honest. The fish gives you exactly what it has calculated you are worth and not 1 unit more. That calculation requires genuine cognitive processing. It updates when you give it new information. A fish that was wary of your hand last month because you used it to catch and stress it may approach it this month because enough neutral interactions have shifted the calculation. You earned that approach. Not through affection, through consistency, through showing up, through being the presence that maintains the system the fish lives in. In a world full of things that perform more warmth than they contain, there is something genuinely refreshing about an animal that only shows up when it has a reason to and is completely honest about what that reason is. Every experienced cichlid keeper has also had the opposite moment. You stare at a fish for 10 minutes, convinced something is wrong with how it is breathing. Everything is fine. You stare for another 5 minutes anyway. The fish stares back with the energy of something that has been dealing with you for months and has developed a complicated relationship with your anxiety. That moment is part of this hobby too. The long game. This hobby does not pay out quickly. And in an era optimized for instant feedback, that is a feature that most people interpret as a bug until they have been in long enough to understand what they were actually waiting for. Mbuna colony takes months to fully stabilize. The hierarchy you see in week 1 is not the hierarchy that exists in month 6. The fish that look dominant in the beginning may not be running the tank by autumn. The colony is negotiating a social structure that takes time to settle, and the keeper who intervenes in every conflict before that process completes is the keeper who never actually sees a stable colony because they keep resetting the clock. A frontosa at 2 years old is not what a frontosa at 5 years old becomes. You cannot rush it. You cannot replicate it with a younger fish. You simply have to be there for the process. This hobby selects against the need for immediate gratification at every level, and the people who stay long enough to see the actual payoff describe it, almost universally, as one of the most satisfying things they have done in this hobby. Not because it was easy, because it was not. Tanganyika, the quiet authority. While the hobby spent 40 years arguing about Malawi colors and Mbuna aggression levels, Tanganyika was sitting in the corner, running a completely different psychological game. Malawi aggression is loud, immediate, visible. You can see it. You can design around it. Tanganyika is slower, colder, more calculated, and far more dangerous for the keeper who tries to manage it using Malawi logic. Take Tropheus. A Tropheus colony does not always destroy with dramatic battles. It uses systematic social exclusion. It applies pressure so quietly and so consistently that the targeted fish stops eating, stops competing, loses condition across weeks, and eventually just fades. Your water parameters test perfectly clean the whole time. Nothing looks obviously wrong until one morning it very suddenly does. By then, it has been running for weeks. Or look at Calvus, a fish that will sit completely still for 40 minutes. You check the glass to confirm it is still alive, and then it moves with a speed and precision that is genuinely startling given how long it spent doing nothing. Pure ambush psychology in a glass box, a fish that has mapped every centimeter of its territory without appearing to move at all. And this is what Tanganyika has been quietly saying while everyone was distracted by the Malawi circus. Real power does not need to announce itself. The most dangerous thing in the room is never the fish tearing across the tank chasing its own shadow. It is the one in the corner that has already mapped the entire room without moving an inch. The one that wins not by being louder or faster or more aggressive, but by being more patient, more precise, and more certain of where it stands than anything else in the water. Tanganyika rewards a kind of patience that most modern attention spans find genuinely uncomfortable. And that is exactly why it belongs in a conversation about why this hobby is not for everyone. Not because it is harder, because it is different in a way that only becomes clear to keepers who were paying attention to the wrong lake. The resurgence. They will come back, not all of them, The people who genuinely found their home in planted tanks and nano setups are not coming back, and that is fine. But a subset of the people who left are already feeling it. That quiet dissatisfaction with a tank that is beautiful and completely predictable. That sense that something is missing that they cannot fully name. Those people will come back. And when they do, they will find a community that is smaller than the one that existed in 1987 and better in every way that matters. They will arrive with patience learned from planted tanks, with maintenance habits built by nano setups, with more realistic expectations of what keeping living animals actually means. The door is open. It has always been open. We are not collecting fish. We are managing systems, living systems with real social dynamics, real hierarchical structures, real consequences for real decisions made in real time. The fish in our tanks are not decorations. They are not accessories. They are animals with evolutionary histories measured in millions of years, with behavioral programs refined by those histories, with genuine social intelligence that rewards the keeper who takes the time to understand it. We are not here for the easy version. The easy version left. It went to planted tanks where the fish are chosen for not disrupting the aesthetic. It went to nano setups where the challenge fits on a desk. It went to fish that school politely and eat whatever you drop in and do not rearrange anything and do not challenge the keeper to understand what they are actually keeping. We are here for the version that pushes back, for the Mbuna that tests the same boundary for the 400th time, because 2 million years of evolution does not care that the boundary was already settled, for the peacock that colored down and told you in the only language it has that something in the social structure is wrong, for the female running the reproductive calculus of the entire tank from a corner while the males argue about rocks, for the frontosa that has not moved in 3 hours and somehow still runs the room, for the trophius colony that requires you to understand social exclusion at a level most people never apply to fish, for the calvus that has been watching the same crack in the rockwork for 45 minutes and you are not entirely sure which of you is more patient. We are here because these fish are honest, in a way that is uncomfortable, sometimes brutal, about hierarchy, about pressure, about what happens when the environment does not match what the animal needs. The tourist left, the filter ran, what remained is us. The hobby is not dead. The hobby is exactly the right size. Stay dark.